Welcome to another episode of The Beverage Enthusiast, where I use my professional expertise in the world of wine, beer, and spirits to help you enhance your home bar. Today, we're going to be talking about maybe the most famous of all cocktails, and that's the Old Fashioned. Now, when you're out at a bar, or depending on what part of the country you're in, you're going to see a lot of different versions of an Old Fashioned. In my career, I've actually gotten to the point where when somebody asks for an Old Fashioned, I ask them how do they want it prepared, because a lot of assumptions are made about whether we have fruit on it, whether that fruit is muddled, whether we're putting soda in the Old Fashioned. Is the Old Fashioned sweet or is it more spirit forward? So I want to help you understand this, and I'm actually going to show you for your home bar how to make two versions for yourself and or your friends. The first thing to understand is that the word Old Fashioned is more connected to the word cocktail in the history of mixology than any other cocktail out there. It's actually, you could look at it as the original cocktail. And this goes back to the early 1800s when a cocktail was very simply spirits, some sort of spirits, whether that be whiskey, gin, rum, bitters, and sugar and water. Back then they were saying sugar and water. Today this is a syrup for us, which we make from sugar and water. You can actually refer to my series of videos on syrups to learn more about that. So where did all the fruit come from? Well, I'm gonna show you a little bit about that, but the original Old Fashioned was very simply spirit, bitters, and sugar, no fruit in it. And this was about the first half of the 19th century. Around the time of the Civil War, they actually started to add liqueurs like absinthe or orange curacao to that version of the cocktail, so that people in the 1860s, 1870s, when they wanted the original, they would say, no, can you make me an Old Fashioned, the way it was done 40, 50, 60 years ago? So first we're going to make the original Old Fashioned, which again is just spirit, bitters, and sugar. And the intention of this cocktail is so that you can actually taste your spirit. It's spirit forward. It's not very sweet. So if you're going to do this kind of Old Fashioned, use a high quality spirit. I am going to use a rye because the original recipe, again going back to the 1800s, would call for a rye, but you can make this as a bourbon Old Fashioned as well. But I'm going to use Redemption, and when I say high quality, I mean an aged, bourbon with or a rye with more years in barrel, has a little more character. It's probably a little bit more expensive, so it's not something that you're going to be drinking every day. So the recipe on this is very simply as follows. You're going to do 2 ounces of your rye, or 90 mils. And then my syrup, I'm actually going to use a Demerara. So this is a simple syrup, but it's a syrup made with Demerara sugar. It just adds a little more character to the cocktail as well. And I'm going to do a ½ ounce, 15 mils. And then I'm going to use Angostura bitters. This bitters actually has been around so long that the original recipes that you would see in the early 1800s would actually call for Angostura. So I'm going to put about 3 dashes in there. Just gives it a little spice. And again, that's all an Old Fashioned really is. It's spirit with a little sweetness and a little spice. Now I'm going to put my ice in. Notice, and this is a mistake I see a lot of people make, don't put your ice in while you're adding the spirit, because it's going to be diluting all of that time while you're going through the steps of making it. So now I'm going to come over to my ice machine. Just going to add enough ice to come up to the same level, and I'm just going to stir this. Again, I'm very simply just trying to get this cocktail cooled down. I am not diluting it, or I'm trying to minimize dilution. I'm going to strain this into my rocks glass over a big cube or a sphere, if you have those. And there you are. Now, in the 1800s, you started to see references around 1830s, 1840s where they would put a little lemon zest on it. And then a little bit later, you started to see where they would use a little orange zest. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to take a little orange peel here. And I'm just going to express it rind side out. I'm just going to squeeze this like that. Express the oils. And there you have a traditional old fashioned. So if you're at a bar or you're making this at home, this is a traditional old fashioned. Okay? Delicious. I can taste the whiskey, a little bit of sweetness. That's what you want an old fashioned to be. Now, when you get to Prohibition, you started to see that they would add fruit to this. The same drink, they would add fruit to it. So what they were doing is they would take a little orange and put it on the glass, and they would take a cherry, right? And they would add a cherry to the glass. Then you also see versions where, which is what I like, instead of the piece of orange, you can garnish with your orange zest. Like this. And that makes for a really nice cocktail as well. And then at the end, you have a little cherry to eat. Okay? So this would have been the version around World War II. Between from the end of late Prohibition to World War II. Then you get to the 70s and the 80s, and they took it a step further. They actually started to take that orange and the cherries. I'm going to take a couple of cherries. I'm using Luxardo cherries, like I always do, as opposed to the bright red, quote-unquote, maraschino cherry. This is Italian cherries. You spend a little extra money, you get a whole lot more flavor. So you take your fruit in the glass like this, and now we're going to muddle it, okay? Now, when you muddle it, don't muddle the rind, because you'll bring out bitterness out of the oils in there. So I am just pressing down on the fruit part of the orange and the cherry, obviously. Now, notice I'm not going to put this into a glass and stir it. If I'm going to do this style of old-fashioned, by definition, this is going to be what we would call a build, okay? And that's when you make the drink right in the glass that you're going to drink it out of. So from there, I can put my bitters in. 3 dashes is good. You can do more if you want a little bit more spice. And I'm going to put my syrup. Again, it's about the same measure. It's about a quarter or a half ounce of simple syrup to 2 ounces of spirit. Sometimes people will go 1 ounce of syrup to 2 ounces of liquor, because this version does tend to be a little sweeter. And the other thing, I'm not going to use, well, this is a fine rye. I don't want to say anything. I love Jim Beam. It's on my bar, obviously. This is more of what I would consider to be a well rye. And the reason I point that out is because of the sweetness and all of the things, the ingredients that go into this cocktail. This is more of a complement rather than the main star. So you don't need to use one of your expensive ryes on this. So I'm going to put 2 ounces. And now from here, I'm going to add my ice. I'm going to go over to my ice machine. And then I'm going to stir. And then I'm going to garnish again with more cherry and orange. You get the idea of how much fruit is in this version, okay? Now from here, this is what you would get for an old fashioned in the 1980s. There are other versions, just one more twist that you can do to this. You can put soda in it. You can top it with soda water. In the Midwest, they call this press. Or you can top it with a sour soda or a sweet soda like Sprite if you want it a little sweeter. The only other version probably that's important to mention is in the state of Wisconsin. They'll do this very recipe right here, but they'll do it with brandy. Actually, sometimes it's called the brandy old fashioned. But it's the only state where that's kind of the national drink. They use brandy and they muddle fruit, and a lot of times they will actually put blue cheese olives or other things. There's a lot going on in that drink. So again, this is more of a hodgepodge, like a stew of a cocktail, and you can see the difference here, right? And this is much sweeter. Still strong. I can taste a lot of the liquor, but it's very sweet. And you're going to have a lot of fruit to eat there. Okay? So that's kind of like the background of the old fashioned and how you can think of it maybe a little differently now at your home bar. Please refer to my other videos if you want to learn more about other cocktails or some of my wine and beer videos as well. And remember to like and subscribe for more content. Cheers, everyone.